Go figure.
Yeah. Well, we've walked through a lot. Like we have walked through a lot of hard stuff. And like the only reason we're together is we both decided to stick it out and work through the hard stuff.
Welcome, and I cannot wait to share with you today about Sarah Bradfield. She is a designer, a graphic designer from New York who now lives in a small town in Georgia, close to me, where her husband and three bio kids, as she calls them, with as well her foster daughter. And together they have two rambunctious boxer dogs. Now, Sarah's going to share with us today the difference that Dave Ramsey has made in her marriage. You know, she shared with me, we had lunch one day and she shared how her first 3 years were quite challenging because of financial obligations and bills and college stuff and all that kind of thing. And so today she's going to share some highlights from that. And also, she has just come back from a 3 week trip from Antarctica. And she said three more countries. So welcome, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me today.
Well, I can't wait. So we first met at one of our business groups, BWFC, and I don't know what attracted me to you, but as we talked earlier today before we began, we have more and more connection. Uh, uh, and who would know when we had lunch that you would share with me that your first 3 years were really challenging
Yeah,
because of finance. So you want to go ahead and start into that when you first
sure.
got married, maybe a little bit about how you guys met.
Okay. We met on eHarmony, which back then it was 2007 and eHarmony was brand new and people did not know what to think of us meeting online. Now it's like everyone meets online, but back then it was still very new, a little bit taboo to like meet online. But I was living in New York, he was living in Georgia. He came up to meet me, and we pretty much decided to get married very quickly. And I decided to move down to Georgia after only 3 months of knowing him. I moved, we got married that next year, and everyone thought I was nuts. But we've been married now for like almost 17 years.
Oh
So
my
I would say it
goodness.
worked out.
Well, so
Um,
17 years says, hey, this is successful, right?
Absolutely. I believe so. And we're still very much in love. And so actually, I would say we are way more in love now, and our relationship is a million times better now than it was back then. But it hasn't been without its challenges. Um,
Well, I've just finished reading a book and it's called His Needs, Her Needs. And so often people are having challenges, whether it's financial or personality or background or habits, whatever it is, they have trouble getting along and they don't search for help. And really with the internet, with us these days is like there's help. But if you don't look for it, if you don't embrace it, if you don't reach out and grab it, then, we can't always do everything on our own, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we did get a lot of help over the years. We have done counseling multiple times with different counselors. Um, and there's been seasons where we haven't needed that. But we are always both committed to getting the help that we need. And there's no shame at all in counseling or getting help
That's
from in that.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
All right. So take us back to the time whenever you guys first got married. I remember some things that you had already shared with me. As you first got married, what brought on the fact that you knew we need some assistance here?
yeah. Okay, so we got married in 2008, which is coincidentally when the economy just completely crashed and people were getting laid off, and just the economy was horrendous. So that was not a great way to start off married life. And we also both had debt coming into marriage, which we had never even discussed before getting married. Like we just were aware, oh, okay, you have student loans, whatever it was. But we did not discuss how much debt we had. And so once we got married and those bills were rolling in and we're paying this and we're paying that, but we don't even know, we didn't have a list of like all of the debts that we had. So one day I sat down and I put them all together and I started writing this list and realized that we were nearly $60,000 in debt. And some of that was credit card. We had two car payments. We both had student loans, and there were some health bills in there, but it felt insurmountable. It felt so overwhelming. I remember just like sobbing in the
Mhm.
shower, thinking like, we're never going to get out of this hole. Um, and we both got laid off about 2 months after getting married.
Oh my
Both
gosh.
got laid off in the same week. And we cried together and we took a day to like grieve. And then we both went out and took jobs that were way beneath the pay that we had previously been getting. And neither of those jobs were using our degrees at all. It was just, we both just took a job just to get a paycheck, um, which is very difficult.
So here you were in a place where you just got married, you've lost your jobs, you've realized you have a ton of debt. And I remember being a young person. I've been married a million years, but I remember being a young person and barely having enough to pay your bills every month. And
Mhm.
you know how frightening that can be,
Yep.
just knowing that that paycheck, has to pay all the bills. And I think all of us have gone backwards at some point in our marriage, whether we've been married a couple years or many, many years. We've had times where, a little bit starts going on the credit card. And honestly, Sarah, I would say that right now we're in a time where I bet you there's somebody out there who they weren't using a credit card. And after 2008, I think a lot of people stopped using credit cards because
Right.
they realized that whenever you use a credit card, that you pay it back at such an interest rate that
Mhm.
it's very hard to get it paid off. Even if whatever you're paying, a large amount of that is interest. And so many
Exactly.
people don't realize that or don't
Mhm.
acknowledge that. Maybe they don't even look at it on um, their bill. And I remember when we got in that position, I would highlight how much interest I was paying because I knew then if I paid $200 on a bill, that I don't know what the numbers are now because I haven't had to do that in so long. But if I was paying, 200 on a bill, I don't know, but maybe half of that could be interest. And
Mhm.
that's a hard thing. So it's
Yeah.
important to know how to budget
Mhm.
and stay in your budget. And we live in a time where we think we all deserve to have everything we want. And that just puts us in a spot. And is there anything besides, just not treating each other nice that can make a bigger difference than money?
It's such an important factor. And I wanted to share this little story with you. Um, Early on in our marriage, when we were still struggling really badly financially, um, I just had a hankering for like chocolate milk. And I really, really wanted like just a chocolate milk, a Yoo-hoo, drink. And I got a coupon. It was 99 cents for the chocolate syrup at the store. And my husband decided we did not need that. We only bought what we absolutely, absolutely needed. And actually, like, we ate rice for a full
Mm,
year. We had rice for almost every meal for
wow.
a full year. We went and bought like a 20-pound bag of rice for $20 and we ate on that for a year because we couldn't afford food. We could not afford health insurance. We couldn't afford food.
Mm.
I really, really wanted this 99 cent, chocolate syrup, and he wouldn't allow that. And like a week or two later, he came home from work with a surprise of a box of Belgian chocolate. It was $15 for this box of chocolate. And I almost killed him. I
Oh
was
no.
not happy with him because I was like, you can spend $15 on chocolate, but I can't spend 99 cents on chocolate syrup. So he thought he was doing something great, but it was the lack of communication and, you know, the lack of consideration, I think, that caused a big problem over just something so trivial.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an indication, right? It's an indication of where you're at and like what your priorities are, And so that
Sarah,
was how bad things were that we couldn't afford chocolate syrup at 99 cents.
the rice and the chocolate and the Yahoo really show where you were at, and that is the kind of story that shows the work that you did and what you guys were willing to do to get your finances in place.
Yep.
But let me ask, the chocolate, is this because he loved chocolate, or was this because, oh, honey, I've just felt bad all this time about not getting you that Yahoo, and I brought
He
you this chocolate?
he grew up in Belgium. So this was Belgian chocolate from Belgium, and he wanted to buy it because he knew it was really good chocolate that you can't get in the States.
Right,
Um, and so he splurged on it, but there was not the conversation calling me and asking me, "Hey, do you mind if I spend $15?" And when you have $0 actually negative because
mm-hmm,
we couldn't actually afford to pay our bills at that time. We were short every single month and we
mm,
could not afford even the minimum payment on our bills. So anything extra was just out of the question. So the lack of communication of him asking me, is this okay to buy this? That was the real problem. He thought he was doing something really sweet and surprising
right.
me. I thought, how could you buy this when we have no money to buy this with? Like it's just an extra, it's not a necessity. And so the communication piece of finances is like the biggest, most important thing, I think, in that aspect of marriage. Like in the financial piece, communication is absolutely key. And being on the same team is like the most important thing.
Absolutely. And I know being married over 40 years myself, I can tell you that probably my husband and I, even though we have great communication, we have had a couple of times because he's so soft-hearted and loving and kind. These are all good things where he would do something where I would be like, "And how much did we pay for that?" So I am that person, and my family, and because he doesn't like conflict, this all goes back into personality styles. Because he doesn't like conflict, he would quickly we would always communicate, and he realized the importance of communicating with me because I was raised to pay attention to how much I spent on things, and not that he wasn't, but he, like I said, all he wanted to do was please me, and he was just that personality style. Now, another style is people would fight and
Mhm.
battle, but we've had our blow-ups over simple little things like that because spending the money properly or making good use of time or whatever was important to me. So, boy, do I relate to that. And somebody else who's listening to this is relating to that. So, you just said one of the most important things is communication. And a
Mhm.
lot of couples do not think, well, I work, I could spend money however I want.
Mhm.
And some couples don't even put their money together. They don't, entrust that, and possibly some people, maybe that helps them stay married, according to them. But, the old-fashioned Christian kind of thing is putting your money together, communicating, working together, being partners, whenever you're married. So,
Right.
your story is, it just has to mean a lot to many, many people that are listening. Okay. So, what made you decide then to go to Dave Ramsey?
Okay, so my husband's brother had heard um, Dave Ramsey on the radio, and this is like back before we did not have smartphones. We did not have iPhones at that time, and so it was like you could listen to him speaking on the radio, but you had to tune in at a certain time, and this and that.
Yeah.
Um, he started listening to Dave Ramsey on the radio, and then he told me to start listening to Dave Ramsey. And so together we heard his plan of the debt snowball. And that plan goes like this. You list all your debts from the smallest to the largest. Okay. And then you start tackling the smallest one first. And you still make the minimum payments on the other debts, but you're socking every extra penny away at that top, that smallest debt until it's gone. Take that off the table, work on the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It can take years to climb out of that hole because you are paying interest.
Mm.
And like there's a verse in the Bible that says the borrower is slave to the lender.
Oh yeah.
And so it when you don't have debt and you're investing, you are making so much gains on that money. But when you're in debt, you're paying someone else to make gains on your money. And so it is just a very difficult hole to climb out of. Um, so we heard about this, but it felt so impossible because we had so much debt and we didn't have enough income to live on. And we had a lease on an apartment. So we moved in with my husband's parents. Okay. They didn't give us money, but they allowed us to live with them for about a year and a half. And in that time, I was working two jobs and my husband was working three jobs and going to school. And so he didn't have a day off at all. He worked 7 days a week
Mm.
and even nights, you know. And for me, I worked my two jobs. And it was really tough because like I did not enjoy those jobs at all. That was not what I wanted to do with my life. I was really struggling mentally and emotionally. We were struggling financially. But when we lived with his parents, we put every single penny towards our debt. We did not go out on date nights. We did not spend money on alcohol or drinks or fun things, vacations. We didn't do any vacations. And like I just remember daydreaming about going on a tropical vacation. And I would tell him all the time, I want to go on a tropical vacation. We still say that. We still say that. But now we can do that. But back then it was just like every single penny went to paying off our debt. And we were very blessed, like to have his parents allowing us to live, you know, there at their house. But it was still very, very hard, very challenging. And to watch everyone else around us, our peers, just spending money like it was nothing. And I also knew a lot of those people were in debt too. They just didn't care. Like oh, that's normal. We're just going to leave that debt there and we'll make the minimum payments. They weren't looking at trying to get out of debt,
Talk
you know?
about snowball. That debt will snowball to such a big ball rolling down the hill that you
Yep,
feel like can you imagine? It catches up with you at some point and runs over you.
yep. Yeah. So, and, you know, I mean, we worked, we worked to pay that off. At one point, it just became really clear we needed to move out. Like we needed our own space. Like we needed to, you know, yeah. So we saved up just enough to put a very small down payment on a house. This was like 2010 at this point. So
That's really big.
yeah, we had been working for 2 years to get out of debt. We saved up like $3,500. It was not a lot. But the economy was still so bad and the housing market was so far down that like we got a foreclosure in Peachtree City, which is almost unheard of. Um, and we just got this phenomenal deal on a house. It was just timing. It wasn't like we timed the market and said, oh, this is a great time to buy real estate. It was like we just got lucky. To
Esther, I look at that as a great blessing also because you're
be
looking at it as timing and such, but because you guys worked together on trying to figure it out, went and got help, and then like stuck to the plan. I mean, think about you had to stick to the plan in order to get out. So here you have $3,500. And during
yeah,
that time, it was a lot of money because the banks also quit. loaning money because they had gotten in such a mess during that time. And actually, we have a rental property. And so, because we had six rental property during that time, the 2008, we didn't lose anything, but we had bought foreclosures also for property.
Um,
Um, so we had this property and we had perfect credit and we always paid our bills. But because we had those properties, the banks, like I remember going to buy a mattress and I thought, hey, we'll just buy that on no interest and pay it off over 12 months. And I'm one of those who would always pay it off before it was due because I don't want to pay any interest because, that's just more money that I could spend somewhere else instead of giving it to the bank for interest.
exactly.
And we went to buy a mattress, and we had never been denied anything because we always pay our bills. And like I said, we owned our house and six properties, and we couldn't get a loan to, I mean, like they wouldn't approve us because we were so heavy with different, smaller house payments for those properties. But because
Yeah.
we're so heavy with that, we couldn't get a loan on that. So
Yeah.
this
We
was a
actually had a
blessing.
similar thing. Yeah. Well, when we were buying our house, I mean, obviously we're looking at interest rates and they're kind of going up and down each day, just a tiny bit. But we were trying to lock in the best interest rate that we could get. And we did not get a great interest rate, even though we had paid off almost all of our debt at that time.
Wow.
Um, we couldn't get a great interest rate because we didn't have a credit card. However, we had paid off our credit card and closed it out, cut it up. We were done with the credit card. Once we paid that off, we didn't want to open another one. I remember the first time realizing how much we were paying in interest on that credit card
Hmm.
because we had been paying the minimum payment for a year, a full year. And after a year, we still owed the same amount as we had, a year ago. So
Mm.
I was like, I don't understand where the money is going. It was going to interest. That's all we were paying.
Well, let
Like,
me
and I
ask Let me ask you this because I don't know the answer on this. So you might be able to answer me on this. So when we were younger, we also got credit cards run up. We were doing the same kind of thing, paying the lowest amount, and try to get them paid off. But also I did this. This might not be Dave Ramsey, and so you're going to be able to tell me that. But we had really good credit, and we had three or four cards. And I found when you have three or four cards, also that's when you're in trouble because now you've got to pay all those cards. But
Mhm.
because we had three or four cards, we would have one that didn't have anything on it. And they would always offer us a super great, interest rate. And so we would transfer. And so we did a lot of that. And because we already had credit, good credit, we were able to transfer to another card and then pay very little interest. Does Dave Ramsey even talk about that?
I've never heard him talk about that.
Maybe that's a no-no, but it worked for us.
Yeah, I've never heard him talk about that specifically, but um, I think his main thing is just get get out of debt as quickly as you possibly can. And so if that's a way that you can reduce your debt, then I think he would be for it. But we never did that. I think the most we ever owed was like a little bit over 3,000. So it wasn't even that much, but that felt like a lot because we could not get out of it because we just weren't
Right.
making enough to get to. And then a year later, we're still owing $3,000 and we had been paying like $100 a month. It was like, how do we not have like a lot of this paid off already? Well, it was all going to interest. And I was like, we've got to get out of this. So we paid off the credit card. We cut it up, we got rid of it, but then we didn't have as good of a credit score, which is really kind of a messed up
Weird.
thing that about our country, right?
Yes.
Um, but anyway, we did end up getting a decent rate, and it was a great price back then because the market was down. We lived there for 6 years, and the market slowly came back. And one day we decided, we actually had two children in that time, and we were pregnant with the third, and we decided we need a little bit bigger of a space. So we decided to sell our house and buy a different house that was larger. Um, and it was tough because the amount that we wanted to spend, we couldn't really find anything in that budget. The market had come back up. So we were really struggling to stay within our budget. But we found a house that had a basement apartment. And we did, it was beyond our budget. And we were like, we don't need that big of a space, and we just took it off the table. But we kept coming back to that. We kept looking at other houses, but we kept saying, well, I really like that one house. Our house is blue. Okay. So we kept saying, I really like that blue house with the basement, And so one day we were like, if we buy that house, we could rent out the basement as an apartment. It has its own separate entrance. It's a 2-bedroom with a kitchen, a bathroom, everything. And so we were like, that could help pay the mortgage on this house. And so we ended up buying the house. Now we have lived here for 7 years.
Mm.
And we have rented it out all 7 years. And we have had the absolute best tenants. We have such great relationships with them. And it has really helped us to pay our mortgage off faster because we took all of the rent money and put it back into the mortgage and just paid extra on the mortgage.
Ah.
In fact, we're pretty close to paying off our house. We could pay it off today if we wanted to. But we have a 2% interest rate. So it's kind of like, yeah, we're in a good position with our house and our mortgage. But just to say that strategically we had to sacrifice a little bit too. We
A lot.
sacrificed use of our basement, you know, and time and energy and the things that you do as like a landlord. So
So what I hear here is great determination and the two of you guys talking and communicating and coming together, making decisions and working together because if only one person's working to pay off things, then it's going to cause a lot of conflict. All right. So tell me then a little bit about you guys started investing. You said you invested, and as we talked just a month or so ago, you were going on a big trip. So let's talk about, first of all, you're investing and getting in a better financial position.
yeah. So once you pay off all your debt, you're in a position to take anything extra and put it aside for retirement. And I can't stress this enough. If anyone is young and listening, the best thing to do is start investing now. Even if it's just a little bit, $100 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is, start investing now because the compound interest will continue to grow over time. And the best thing that you can do is have time in the market.
Mm.
So that is one thing that we learned from Dave Ramsey. And I can't pretend that I'm like an expert at the market at all because I'm not, but I know that you should be invested. You should have a 401k, you should have a Roth IRA. And if you're lucky enough to have those maxed out, you should be putting money into the stock market and, learning enough about investing. Like there's so many books out there that can teach you just the basics. You don't have to be a day trader making lots of trades. Put money in and leave it there. It will grow over time. Even if the market does this, it will grow over time. And, too many people get to like their 50s and 60s and they haven't saved for retirement. And then they're in a huge pickle because, they're faced with working until they can no longer work, but they don't have anything to live on beyond that. And like, we don't want to be in that position. So, and I don't think anyone does, right? So,
Okay, so that is such great advice, and I'm sure that somebody probably told us that whenever we first got married. But all through those years, you always feel like you're just making it, and then you do get in debt and go through the things that you just talked about, and then you're paying those off and you're saving every cent, and you never feel like you have enough money. I think sometimes we focus on not having enough, And the one thing I want to share is this. I was a sales director with Mary Kay Cosmetics, and we had two big events, each year. And one was for consultants, one was for sales directors. And I was at a sales directors event where Susie Orman spoke, and she was just talking because these are women who are managing the business. And, too often women, some of us are mathematical and some of us are just not, right? But too often women don't pay attention to finances and that gets turned over to men. And they're
Mm,
running a business. And so Susie spoke to us. And I was a person who, because I had been through the things like you, I even grew up that way where my dad was kind of tight-fisted with the money. And so I held on to my money. And sometimes somebody can say just one thing to you and it changes your thought processes. And Susie that day said, I want you to put up your hand and hold a fist tightly. And yes, you can hold on to your money. And first of all, everything that you've done, Sarah, yes, you had to do that to be able to pay your bills. And when we were young, yes, we had to hold on to our money. But when we have such a tight hold on, nothing can get out, but then nothing can get in. And
mhm,
sometimes we get to a spot where we're so tight. And I want to share this, not really for what all you said, because this is where, and I've been there too, done exactly the same kind of thing as you've done. But for me at this time in life, I needed to learn to let go a little and open my hand because then, some is going to go out, but some is going to come in. And so I came to a place like that where, and it changed my mentality because I was super tight on money. That kind of goes against what we've just been talking about. But there's times where we have to follow suit and do what needs to be done. And then there's times where we have to be more open-handed. Hey, and open-handed would be making those investments that you're
mhm.
talking about. And we weren't able to do that when we were younger because I was so tight. That's my
Yep,
point.
I see. Yeah, I mean, we weren't able to do it because we were in so much debt. We couldn't put money towards investments while we were still in thousands and thousands of dollars worth of debt. But I mean, we took on extra jobs. Like we took second, third jobs to pay that down. And I mean, I remember I was pregnant with my first child in 2012. And I was working two jobs, 50 hours a week,
Mm.
and I put every single last penny towards debt. And we had a plan, and we stuck with that plan, and we paid that debt off like a month before having our first child.
Oh,
Um,
that's
we got
awesome.
we got out of debt. However, like a month later, my car died on the side of the road, and I had to be done with that car and take another loan. But I mean, because all of the other debts were out, and we already had that experience of like paying off debt, and we were already used to a frugal lifestyle, we were able to pay that car loan off within a couple years. You
Hey,
know,
what I hear is, and this is life, right? Whether it's a health issue, a car, or something in your house, going wrong and that kind of thing. Okay, so this has been so awesome. I hope this has helped somebody. Let's shift to how things changed as then you were more financially fit and you always still had that mentality of, respecting your money, right? And respecting what you could afford. But as time went on, like when we had met for lunch after that business meeting, and I just think that this was meant to be and that we've come together to share this because somebody needs to hear it. Because, we talked a little that day, but we didn't know each other when we went to have lunch together that day. And we found out all this. So you shared with me that your husband loves to go fishing, and so he likes to go on fishing trips. Tell me a little bit about the fishing trips, and then share a little bit about your trip that you have just come back from a 3-week trip. Mother of three. She gets to leave home, go off, and have an awesome, fun time and memories forever. So, share with us a little bit about your husband's fishing trips and, what he loves about those so much and then how you came about taking your trip that you just went on.
Yeah. So, first of all, I cannot thank my husband enough I think he is the most incredible man, and not every husband is up for the task of taking, 3 weeks
3 weeks.
to allow your wife to go off and travel the world while you stay home with we have 3 kids, but we also have a foster child, and so it is a lot. It is all hands on, and he also works full time. So he requested to be able to work from home, and he was allowed to do that for those 3 weeks. And he also did all of the work of taking care of the kids, so I cannot thank him enough.
Mm-mm.
um, and he does go on a lot of fishing trips. That is his absolute passion. He loves fishing so much. And he goes for long weekends down to Florida and goes deep sea fishing. And we kind of, over the years, came to an agreement that we would trade time for time. So if he goes on a trip for 3 days, I will mark 3 little tally marks down, and and so I will say I like to save up my time that I get to take for longer trips, because I like going out of the country and I like going to see other countries. So this time I had saved up like the 3 weeks of time, and and honestly, like, my husband was just so gracious to let me take all that time away at one time in one trip. Um so I have been to 6 of the 7 continents, and I wanted to get to the last continent, which for most people, the last continent they get to is Antarctica, because, it's just a lot harder to get there. It's more expensive. It's a big commitment. It's a time commitment too. Um, but I had always had that on my bucket list. I really wanted to do that. And so that trip was, a year in the making. I had told my husband that I would not use money from our family budget, from both of our incomes, to pay for that trip. I said, I will take on extra side work, freelance work, contract work, as a graphic designer to pay for that trip. And I was very blessed to get some big jobs in that were just totally above and beyond what we normally budget for. So I saved all that money in a separate account, and I was able to pay for the trip with that. But yeah, went down to Santiago, Chile. Then from there, like, spent a couple days there. Then I went to Buenos Aires, Argentina. I loved that country so much. Like, I could live there. I loved that city.
Hmm.
Um, Spent several days there, and then traveled down to Ushuaia, Argentina, which is like, it is also known as the end of the world. It is the southernmost city in the world. And so from there, that is the port town where people leave to go to Antarctica. And so you get on a cruise ship and you cruise down to Antarctica. And I think our cruise was a 10-day cruise. But I had taken time on the front end and the back end for travel and just fun in other countries. So yeah, amazing trip. We saw thousands and thousands of penguins. We saw seals, we saw whales, we like the big thing there is wildlife. We did the polar plunge, which is jumping into freezing cold water and just being absolutely insane. So yeah, it was the trip of a lifetime. It was the most amazing experience, and I'm just grateful that I got to have that experience. Yeah.
Well, sir, I have to say that you are young, and to have come from zero to the position you're at now. I mean, what a great blessing. And everybody doesn't get those kind of opportunities, but it sounds like you and your husband are really hard workers, and you stick together and you talk about things. Um, I mean, I just don't even know what to say. It's like, it's crazy for you to have been able to travel, how much you've traveled. And so, what was your favorite thing? A couple of your very favorite things, and tell us how that felt, and what you saw and how exciting that was.
I went there hoping and praying to see orcas. I love orcas so much. And You
I
know,
don't,
it's
I don't know what that is.
killer whales.
Oh, okay.
Remember Shamu? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I really, really wanted to see a killer whale in the wild. You know, you can see them in a tank or, on TV, but I really wanted to see one in the wild. And the thing about the time when we went in November, and that is the very beginning of the summer season. And it's a lot more likely to see tons of penguins rather than whales. You usually see more whales at the end of the season, but you can still see them, So I was really hoping to see one. And so it just so happened that I was outside on the deck of the ship. Like I could have been inside in my room. I could have been, in the lounge but I just so happened to be outside with my camera. Like I have a good Canon camera. I love photography. And so I had my camera with me. And someone pointed out and said, there's a whale over there. But we didn't know what kind of whale, but they had just seen like a fin. And so I got my camera up and ready, and I was just ready. The orca came out of the water, snap, snap, snap. I was like, orcas. And I was just so excited. It was two orcas, and they only came out of the water like where you could see them one time. And I got a picture of them. And there's only like one other guy on the trip that got a picture of them, I think, because nobody expected that. Nobody was ready. Like we didn't know. But it was just such a magical moment. I would say that was the highlight. That was the biggest exciting thing for me.
I bet you have some of that on your Instagram, right?
I don't have the orca picture, but I could put it up there. I
You
could put
could
it up.
have it. Anyway, I
Um,
was going to say that people could follow you on your Instagram,
Absolutely.
and that
Yeah.
is what? Sarah Bradfield?
Sarah J. Bradfield. Sarah has an H, J. Bradfield. So that I do have lots of pictures from that trip, and so I posted a lot. Um, one other thing that we saw a highlight was we saw a very, very, very rare penguin that has white feathers.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's not an I thought it was albino, but it was not an albino penguin. It's called a leucistic penguin. And it's basically like they have the pigment in their eyes and their beak, but they don't have the pigment in their feathers.
Hmm.
And so it's extremely, extremely rare. None of the expedition guides who have been doing this for like 30 years had ever seen one. Okay.
Wow.
They were like ecstatic. And so we got amazing pictures of this rare penguin. When I came back to the US and I typed in like leucistic penguin, there were news articles about this penguin being spotted this year. And so that it was just amazing that we got to see that in person. We were at the right landing site at exactly the right time when that penguin came out of the water and onto the beach that we were on. And, it was just amazing. Yeah, it was really cool.
Well, what I hear from you is that you have had self-discipline. You have been willing to work on things whenever there's hardship, and that you have been greatly rewarded. And I can't think, if anybody deserves it more than whenever we put in the time, we do the work, we work the extra jobs, we have that communication, we have the ups and the downs in our marriage. And it's gonna happen. But if you figure out what you need in order to make it work, and I'm so excited for you to been able to share this story today. And I also want to say that as Sarah and I were talking, she has this big background in marketing. And here she runs into me, and, this is the Extraordinary Marriage Podcast. And my passion is to help people figure out how to get past their personality differences. Um, you know, Finance is not my area in that, but here today you've heard that of how finances make a difference. There's so many things that make a difference in marriage. And Sarah shared with me as we were coming into this today that she's looking at going into counseling. There again, you know, the illumination of the meeting that we had where we met each other, not knowing that She wants to help marriages and families through counseling, and
Mhm.
she's getting ready to start her education in that. And that my passion, I have 3 grown kids, 15 grandkids, and my passion has become the thing of helping people move past their challenges. So Sarah, I couldn't believe today as you shared with me, I'm looking at going in counseling because I'm thinking she's going to do marketing, and you are doing marketing right now, and that's going to help you pay for your education and move through that. So she is looking for people who need that marketing help in their business. Because you know what? As a business person, you can't do everything. I'm a person who tries. It is not easy to do that. So, Sarah, tell us a little bit about. So, you're getting ready to go into counseling, and just share. I know you have a foster child and your own kids. Is like share your heart and what's moved you towards going into counseling that you would put out the big bucks for that education to move in an area where you can help families and marriage.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll share. I'm a graphic designer and I've been on a marketing team for 14 years. And I did recently get laid off from that. And I realized like this market is so oversaturated with graphic designers. There's so many designers, there's so limited amount of jobs. And, I know for myself, when I was looking for a counselor, I couldn't find a counselor that fit the specifications of what I was looking for that also took insurance. And there is a huge need for mental health professionals, and so just looking at the need alone, I was like, this is something that I could do. And I probably would be very good at it because I really care about people's marriages, people's families, and especially foster and adoptive families. I have a big heart for them because it's just so hard. Like it's just such a hard burden to carry as a foster parent or even an adoptive parent. It's not as easy as it looks from the outside.
Mm.
Um, we, yeah, like my husband works for a foster care agency and he's a counselor. And just seeing the work that he does, it's so inspiring. It's so life-changing. It's so like amazing. And there's such a big need. Like people are struggling with their foster kids. People are struggling with their adopted kids. And, to be someone who could help them form a healthy attachment when these kids come from so much trauma,
Mm-hmm.
I think that is like something that I really want to do with my life. So yeah, and also just marriages that are struggling. We've struggled on and off. We've gone to marriage counseling with a few different counselors over the years, and it's really transformed our marriage, especially in the first year. Our first year of marriage, we almost didn't make it. And we ended up going, we didn't have money for counseling, but luckily there was a man in our church who was willing to do counseling for free for the church members. And so we went to see him. I think we only went to like 6 sessions with him, but it transformed our marriage and we were able to get on the same page and make a plan. So, I think counseling is so important. I think it's so needed and there's such a need for counselors.
And I think whenever you have a third party come into play, then they can see things that you yourself are not able to see because, to be honest, we see our side, right? We see our side. And if we're not a person who can look at the other side of things, you know, it might not ever work. But whenever somebody brings light to something and we start to see, oh, I didn't think about the other side or how that looked to my spouse, then that's where the journey begins, where we start seeing things from the other side. I like to tell people, put on the shoes of the other person and how does that look to them? But most of the time we need a little help in doing that because, we're just born self-centered, aren't we?
And once you start giving a little and they start giving a little, you're moving towards each other, and marriage should not be like we're fighting against each other.
Right.
It should be us together against the world,
The
like
world.
everything
That's right.
coming at you, all the hard things that are coming at you, all of the like the distractions and the negative circumstances and the hardships and all of those things, like you are a team battling those things together. And like, I can't tell you how much that picture has changed our mindset, you know?
I
So
love it. I love it. I love your story, Sarah Bradfield. I love it. And I think this is a very special story that's going to make a difference to many, many people.
thank you so much. Yeah.